CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
Welcome to yet another Conversations on African Philanthropy with me, Moyo. I'm excited to be joined by Upendo Ngumba from the United Nations Associations of Tanzania. We are shooting this episode at the margins of our MasterCard-funded project that looks at the contributions of the non-profit sector towards dignified and fulfilling jobs. Upendo, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Earlier on, in the session that you took part in, you described the United Nations Association of Tanzania as the oldest organization in Tanzania. Can you talk a bit about that? Because that was mind-blowing for me, just to think of Tanzania as one of the countries that gained independence earlier than most of the African countries. And you are here telling us that this organization is probably almost as old as Tanzania's liberation story and is still here.
Yeah.
What kept it going till today?
Okay. Thank you very much. So, what kept the organization to strive until this moment is the way it works, but also in collaborating with different stakeholders.
Yeah.
Yes, like the government, the ministry, the support we've been getting from different stakeholders and private sectors as well has helped the organization to strive.
Yeah.
But also even the donors that have been trusting our organization, working with our organization since it was established.
Yeah.
Yes, so, but also the impact, the outcomes, like the way we work with the communities as well, but also the beneficiaries outside there was also supported in one way or another, the organization to strive as well.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's talk about what does the United Nations Association of Tanzania do? Can you describe the organization's mission, some of the activities that we are engaged in, so that the audience can understand the rich history behind this organization?
Okay. UN in Tanzania is a non-profit organization, and it promotes sustainable development goals, but also youth rights.
Okay.
But specifically when I'm talking about youth rights, economic youth rights, but also civic engagement rights, like young people to access spaces for them to raise their voices.
Yeah.
So what we've been doing, just working with young people, making sure that we foster or we promote them to have spaces in decision-making bodies from local, national level, regional level to international level.
Yeah.
But also when I'm talking about economic rights, I'm talking about youth, making sure that youth have access to financial or I can say public funds, public and private funds. So we've been working in advocating for youth rights, also making sure that policies, laws, and regulations are friendly or better or favoring young people to have a sustainable livelihood.
Yeah.
Yes. This is...
Okay. So in all of those programs and interventions, and in the last 60-something years, I think it's 64 or so years,
yes,
what would you say have been some of the noticeable, challenges that the organization has faced? And then I would want us also to talk about some of the successes that you can refer to. I'm sure as an organization, you look back and say, in the last 64 years, this is what people will always remember us for. But let's talk about the challenges and barriers first, then we come to that.
Okay, the organization has been facing the challenges in maintaining the programs. So because it's a donor funding, we've been implementing donor funding
Yeah.
projects.
Yeah.
So sometimes funds has been a very challenging because donors will just come and you just go away. So sometimes in maintaining this kind of projects, it's been a very challenging to us as well.
Yeah.
So sometimes we could have maybe a project will take, for it to be successful, will take maybe 5 years, but
Yeah,
then because of limited funds, the program will just end within 2 years. So what you're expecting to get, or the outcomes you're expecting, you'll never meet them because of the funding. That has been a challenging to us. And also
Yet you have remained alive for 64 years. So how talk about why that is a challenge, but it's a challenge that has not stopped you from existing, because most institutions would face a funding challenge and then close down. But I'm intrigued by this one. You are saying it's a challenge, but you are still here today. So what has kept you going?
Okay, sustainability strategies.
Yeah.
Most of the time when the project ends, we as an organization, we just come and just look on what we can do to sustain those kind of projects.
Yeah.
So we've been also, by using the beneficiaries themselves, like the beneficiaries, we just create those kind of environment where beneficiaries will just feel like they own the project.
Yeah.
That project is theirs.
Yeah.
So we engage the beneficiaries from the planning processes and executing processes, and also in evaluating process.
Yeah.
So to make sure that they are part and parcel of the project.
Yeah.
So that has been helping a lot. But also after the project has been phased out, we are trying to look one way we've been doing in maintaining this kind of projects. It's creating community of practices.
Yeah.
So different stakeholders, but also people we collaborate with. We just have this kind of community of practice where we'll be just sharing ideas, but also we learn from our experiences, but also challenges. So we come together and think and come with other ways how we can do to make sure that we got the outcomes, that we are.
So in other words, a financial challenge on its own is not enough to cause an organization to stop existing, as long as it has a good cause and is embedded in communities and it's got good partnerships. Is that one of the lessons that you're sharing?
Yes, that is one of the lessons. Yes, that is among the lessons.
So the one challenge is financial. What are the other challenges?
The other challenges sometimes is just to when before implementing or before writing a proposal, you just research about the youth problems in the community. So sometimes it's a challenging because when we work with government as well, with other stakeholders. But sometimes every year the government we have its own priorities that maybe probably they will not align with your own organization's goals and objectives, with the government priorities as well at the country. So sometimes it's been very difficult to engage other stakeholders, specifically the ministries, the member of parliament. They have their own agenda. Every year they would come with their new agendas. So sometimes it's been very hard to implement this kind of project. Probably you'd be advocating for youth economic rights, but these political leaders would have their own agenda. Maybe they would like to prioritize in industry or maybe decision-making process for young people, sometimes policies, so sometimes national youth councils for the young people. So this has been also a challenging in making sure that we implement and we get the outcome that we are expecting.
So when we were talking about the financial challenge, you're also telling us about how you have, in a way, mitigated against that. So in this one, how have you mitigated against? So in other words, how have you solved it over time?
The challenge of maybe not aligning with the government.
Yes.
So sometimes it's very good when you have very good relationship with this
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
institutions, but also sitting down and talk. Like
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
so we have a table meeting with this kind of stakeholders, talking, but also making sure that before we start planning maybe and implementing our projects,
Yeah.
to make sure that what specific needs do youth prioritize on that specific time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for example, right now we're expecting to have a local government in election in our country and next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for now you to go and tell the government that you are implementing some things about climate, and so you want them to maybe to give you a hand,
Yeah.
because it's not the agenda right now. The
Yeah.
agenda is to make sure that young people are participating in
the
this kind
elections.
of election.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just to see and look ahead, like what's
Yeah.
gonna be.
Yeah.
Yes, but also youth needs differ according to where they come
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
Like young people from Tanzania, Dar es Salaam specifically, needs are different from young people
Yeah.
from Mwanza.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is also being a challenge when you want to implement the project in
Yeah.
a nationwide.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there any other challenge again that you want to talk to?
I think these are the major challenges,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah.
sometimes the challenges will be the beneficiaries themselves.
Okay.
Yes, how would they accept
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
the project that you're about to implement
Yeah.
in a certain community?
Yeah.
Acceptance of that project.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's been very yes, challenging.
But quite clearly, given that you've been around for 64 years, you now know when communities are going to accept you and when communities are going to reject you.
Of course.
Clearly. I mean,
Yes.
there's no way you would still be around if
Yeah.
you didn't master that. So what are some of the strategies that you use to make sure that your programs are easily accepted and integrated into communities?
We have a very good relationship with the local government authorities.
Okay.
Yes, that's why I said we are implementing our projects from local level, national level, regional to international level.
Yeah.
So when we have a good relationship with local government authorities, they are the ones who helped us to talk to the community, to talk to people they know and other leaders as well.
Yeah.
The leaders from the street, but also from the villages.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
streets in
Yeah.
town and villages, the rural areas.
Yeah.
So they would help us making sure that the community understand the project, understand what we want to deliver to the community.
Yeah.
So it would be very easier for us to engage with the community when the government itself, the government leaders themselves talk to this, to this community.
So I don't know, I mean, since you are part of the organization, but you are not as old as the organization,
Yes.
I don't know how much far back you are able to go to give our audience and listeners and viewers some of the key moments of the organizations over the last 64 years. What have been those key moments that you could speak to? So, for example, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, early 2000s, I mean, each context presents particular, opportunities, particular moments to the organization. So, are there any key moments that you want to speak to?
From 1964 until now.
I mean, as far as you can remember,
Okay. The key moment was when we were working with young people accessing the funds.
Yeah.
And we managed to help young people to access funds from the local government authorities. It was more than 900 million. Yes, for them. Yes, from the local government. So it was.
This would be US dollars or shillings.
Tanzanian shillings.
Tanzanian shillings. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
and more, and we were about to reach 1 billion. Yeah. So it was a very good moment, because for us that is a success, because we are working for young people to make sure they access these funds. As we know that these funds had a lot of challenges at the time.
Yeah.
Yes. Regulation themselves, they were not favorable for young people to access the fund, but also even the system itself, the structure,
Yeah,
the people who
yeah.
were just monitoring the funds, they had a lot of challenges. So for us, making sure that they access that amount of money, it was a very good moment as well.
Right.
But also, when we advocate for youth priorities to be reflected in the national development plans,
Okay.
and we work together with young people in 2020 to make sure that their priorities are reflected in 5 years development plans. And we had a lot of priorities. We had almost 3 to 5 priorities, and we were so happy when the 5 year development plan came out and find that some of the youth priorities that we are advocating, they were reflected on the plans. So that is success, but also it was a good moment to feel like, yes, that's the work they've been doing, and now we can see the result from it. Yes.
So do you think and feel that young people can and in fact do influence policies?
Yes, young people do affect policy as well. Yeah. So I can say young people has a big role to affect policy, even more than in non-profit organizations as itself, because they're the ones who are advocating for their priorities
and their future
on those kind of policies. So for the youth bearers, they would love to hear from young people themselves than non-profit organization to talk on their behalf. So most of the time we just create platforms for young people to meet direct with their youth bearers so that they can be heard, so that their voice can be heard. So we can just create this platform sometimes physically, but also online platforms where they can be heard, they can be talking about their own issues and challenges to affect the policies. Because sometimes if they're not talking, and the agencies, the government institutions, but also the non-profit organization also will just stay quiet. Because in Tanzania we had a national youth policy since 2007. It was outdated. So it was this year when we amended the national youth policy. So now we have a national youth development policy of 2024. Yes, it was the young people themselves who advocated for it. Like, we want new policy because the policy we have, it is outdated. So they are the ones who can advocate and they're the ones who can bring change.
So you're saying the role of the association was to create a platform for young people to actually influence this policy. What would you say are successes of this policy? So for example, you would say it's outdated, doesn't cater for this or that and the other. These are the issues that we want reflected. So what would be some of the issues that young people wanted and now you can see them in the policy?
Okay. One among the issue was young people were advocating for the National Youth Council. In Tanzania, we have an act. National Youth Council Act of 2015, and since we had an act, there's no implementation. Like, we don't have a youth council until now. So young people have been advocating, and the policy is stating that Tanzania should have a youth national council, because it is there. The act is there. So the implementation have been reflected in the policy as well. But also another thing is how young people are going to be empowered. So in Tanzania we have 72 economic funds to empower not only young people but all citizens. But then young people have to leverage from these funds. So 62 funds are from the government, but also 10 funds from private sectors. So it's young people who advocated for that. Like, we want to be empowered with funds, so with capital, so that it can be easy for us to start and grow businesses as well. So yes, another thing is young people were advocating for quality healthy services.
Yeah.
As we can see, young people now, they didn't have quality services when they wanted to go to these health centers.
Yeah.
So through the policy, the health services have been reflected as well. So now young people, we are expecting young people from this year or so after the implementation of the policy, they're being accessing the quality health services. But also the strategy. Our policy didn't have a strategy. So this year, when the policy was out, but also it came with the strategy. It was very difficult to implement the policy without the strategy. So since 2007, we didn't have a strategy, but this time we have a strategy. So it will be very easy to implement the policy. And this was the thing that was advocated for with the young people themselves. Like, we need a strategy. We can't have a policy without a strategy. So these are the few things that have been reflected in the policy. But there are a lot of things as well.
So the other thing that I wanted, we are about to wind down. Can you talk a bit about the name? Why United Nations Association of Tanzania? I'm still trying to make sense of the United Nations.
Okay, why United Nations? Okay, so there's an agency, UN agency called WFUNA, Wafuna. So they were just trying to see how can we bridge the gap between UN and community, UN and CSOs. How can we bridge the gap here between? There it's when they formed these UNAs, United Nations Associations. So there are a lot of United Nations Association in the world. There is the United Nations Association of USA, of Uganda. That is when now we have United Nations Association of Tanzania. Yes. There is when they formed this kind of association.
Which brings me to another question. So then how then do you work with these other associations in other countries?
Okay, so under Wafuna, they have a very good structure. They have their leaders, but also they have representatives in every country where they would come together, plan and implement various projects as well. But also we are supported as well by the UN as well, looking over us, like what are we doing? Are we also implementing the sustainable development goals? But also, how do we help to bridge this gap? As the objective itself was to bridge the gap between CSOs and but also community and UN itself. So this is how we work with them. But also UNA is a local NGO. Yes, it was registered, so it's very you can, when you just try to read our documents, UNA Tanzania was established in 1964, but it got its registration in 2019
with the government or with the United Nations.
I mean, in the country. So for it to operate locally, it had to register in 2019 locally. So it's a local NGO right now. But then it wasn't operating as a local NGO. But since 2019, it's registered. It's got its registration, and now it started implementing different projects. Fundraising as well has been a core activity in the organization.
All right, so let's end by talking a bit about yourself. So what's your background? Who is Upengo? For those that might be listening to the work that you are doing and they're asking, we see her, but who is she? What's your background? What do you do in the organization?
Okay. So Upendo is a Tanzanian woman, born and raised in Tanzania, but also I am a youth advocacy lead at United Nations Association of Tanzania. I started working as a volunteer, and when I started growing, and after gaining the experience for some time, then I started working as I just got a contract to work
Yeah.
years now
Yeah.
and implementing the youth projects.
Okay.
But also I have a background of law enforcement degree, but also I am a student pursuing
Yeah.
Masters of Public Administration
Okay.
at University of Benessa.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time
Okay.
and talking to us about the United Nations Association of Tanzania.
Okay.
You see, you were not nervous at all. You did it very well.
I don't know if I did. Yeah.
You
I'm
did
not
it very
sure.
well.
I'm
Very,
not
very
sure.
well, and so articulate. In fact, this is one area that I really commend you for, because even at the panel, you were very articulate. You are still as articulate as you were now in telling us about the story of the organization, some of the challenges and some of the opportunities. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Upendo Ngumba with the United Nations Association of Tanzania, joining us here at the margins of our event that is funded by the Mastercard Foundation, focusing, like I said, on the contributions of the non-profit sector towards creating dignified and fulfilling jobs. We are shooting this at the English Point Marina in Mombasa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.